Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, September 9th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show and welcome to the weekend. We made it all the way through the first week of September. Glad to have you here. Hope you enjoyed the kickoff of NFL football last night. I sure did. Although I didn't like the outcome of the game. I really don't like the Denver Broncos at all. But it was a well-fought game and defensive struggle. Man, it's pretty amazing. And speaking of the NFL, we've got some NFL stories we're going to be getting to in hour 2 today in Toker Talk Radio. Looks like the NFL Players Association isn't going to wait for the NFL. They're just going to go ahead and study medical marijuana on their own, which makes sense because it's the players who will benefit from it. So we'll get to that in hour 2. And speaking of hour 2, got a special announcement for you. After much prodding and goading and nagging from my chat room, and it's all taken with the most love I can possibly imagine. But after all those suggestions, I've finally gotten us a Google Voice number for our studio call-in here, and it's live right now. Don't call in now, though. Let's wait till hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, and check out the phone number. Not only is it a Bay Area, South San Francisco number, a 650 area code, but the phone number is 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's right, 650-534-2565 or 650-LEGAL-MJ to call in to the Russ Belville Show. And you can call in anytime you want, but if you're calling in anytime other than 4 o'clock, you're going to get the voicemail, which is cool. You can leave us a voicemail message and we can play that on the show as well. So like if you had questions for Dr. Mitch or our Hemp Day Hump Day with Doug Fine or our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment, any of these segments, you could call in on the voicemail line, leave your question there, and then we'll get to it the next episode. Also, we're going to have another recurring segment joining us here. Jorge Cervantes is going to be helming our Cultivator's Corner that we're going to place opposite the Leap speakers. So on Thursdays, you're either going to get a cop or you're going to get Jorge Cervantes telling you how to grow pot. So that's a great addition to our show. Thanks to Jorge and his site, marijuanagrowing.com. I encourage you all to check that out, marijuanagrowing.com. And starting next week, we've got 8 weeks away from Marijuana Election Night 2016. We're going to start a regular feature of interviewing the campaign spokespeople or the candidates themselves that are running in the 2016 election. You'll hear those interviews on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays over the next 8 weeks. So stay tuned for that. All right, coming up on today's show, all sorts of great stuff to tell you about. Stanford, the university, is studying roadside marijuana saliva testing. We'll explain why that's a bad idea. In our Drug War Data Mines, we have a new study on using pot while pregnant. We'll tell you about the results of that study. We're going to, at 1:30, have our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment that we messed up yesterday. Now that I've got that Google Voice number, we can get in touch with Lenny Freeling out in Colorado. He's a longtime NORML activist and a former judge and current defense attorney out there in the great state of Colorado. We'll talk to him about the social use initiative and other items that are going on in Colorado. At the end of the hour, we'll get into a radical rant. I'm going to talk about sex and drugs and marijuana and freedom and how they're all really the same thing. Then in hour 2, we've got Arizona's governor who doesn't understand that marijuana is safer than alcohol, so we'll explain it to him slowly. We've also got Jesse Ventura. He's got a new book on marijuana, and he's making the case for legalization. A tragic story in Chicago to tell you about, the NFL Players Association, Canadians answering a pot survey, and the New Mexico State Fair. Well, it ain't quite as cool as the Oregon State Fair. All that's coming up here on this Friday edition of the Russ Belville Show, live from Potland, Oregon.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Earn your PhD in THC monetization with CannabisRadio.com. Don't be late.
While the feds and state are doing their dance, you still need to transact business and manage your cash. Go professional and let your customers pay with PayQuick. They pay you and they earn rewards points. PayQuick connects to your bank account for free and secures all of your transactions. And with PayQuick, you can pay your producers and processors for free. Plus, it pays to have it because it makes depositing your cash safe and so easy. No cops, no crooks, just compliance and comfort, knowing you have your cannabis business in check with PayQuick. PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
Doc Rob, the concierge for better living.
Cannabis is just one of the many great plants that we have on this planet called Earth that we can use consciously and intelligently to improve our well-being.
Take a real, raw, inside look at healthier living while sharing great ideas and improvements for a better quality of life.
Learning to live and live well is a lifelong process. This is a journey. You could be 80 years old or 8 years old. You can still learn something that's going to make tomorrow a little bit healthier, a little bit easier, a little bit happier, a little bit better.
The concierge for better living with Doc Rob. Only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Friday, September 9, 2016. Ottawa, Canada. The recent case of a Canadian man permanently denied entry at the U.S. border for admitting his past marijuana use is highlighting the absurdity of marijuana prohibition. The government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has committed to legalizing marijuana in Canada, which would then keep law-abiding Canadian citizens from visiting the United States. More absurd is the fact that Canadians crossing into the U.S. from British Columbia would be entering Washington State, where cannabis is legal for adults. After this election, there may be a similar border between the provinces of New Brunswick and Quebec and the state of Maine, where cannabis is legal on all sides, but Canadians admitting to using it could not cross. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale said in an interview with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation late on Thursday, quote, "We obviously need to intensify our discussions with our border authorities in the United States, including the Department of Homeland Security," end quote. Anchorage, Alaska. The owners of Frozen Buds have high hopes now that they've received Alaska's first retail marijuana license. Destiny Need, co-owner of the Fairbanks business, received a round of applause from the audience after she won unanimous approval for the inaugural permit from the 5-man Alaska Marijuana Control Board. She clapped with both hands above her head after getting the okay. As she walked back to her seat, she told the audience, quote, "Now all I need is some herb," end quote. The board has been working on rules for the industry since the November 2014 vote approving the recreational use of marijuana. Frozen Buds received approval to make such items as cannabis-infused butter, oil, brownies, caramels, truffles, cookies, cupcakes, fudge, banana bread, ice cream, granola bars, and breakfast treats called Wake and Bake bars. Enlighten, Alaska, a retail store planned in Anchorage, was the second permit issued. Lansing, Michigan. Though the highest court in Michigan has ruled the fight for marijuana legalization in 2016 is over, a new federal lawsuit offers a sliver of hope. Two signature gatherers for the ill-fated Am I Legalize campaign have asked a federal court to halt the printing of ballots until all the signatures for the initiative are counted. Am I Legalize turned in more than 354,000 signatures, well more than what they needed to qualify for the ballot. But the Secretary of State's office rejected thousands of signatures that were older than 180 days, citing a Michigan law regarding so-called stale signatures. The Michigan Supreme Court agreed with the lower court rulings that the state had no legal obligation to count the stale signatures. The plaintiffs allege that their right to vote has been unconstitutionally infringed by the state. Am I Legalize is also preparing a suit for the U.S. Supreme Court over the signatures. Also in Michigan, the state Senate has produced the 3/4 vote needed to add 3 new bills to the Michigan medical marijuana program that would legalize dispensaries and edible marijuana products. Those bills must be reconciled with the House versions before heading to the governor's desk. Sacramento, California. SAM Action, the political action committee of the anti-legalization group Project SAM, announced another $1.3 million in fundraising to defeat marijuana initiatives nationwide. Kevin Sabet, founder of Project SAM, said the money came from a retired millionaire in Pennsylvania named Julie Schauer, who is opposed to marijuana legalization because, quote, 455,000 people were hospitalized in emergency rooms for panic attacks, paranoia, and psychosis related to marijuana consumption, end quote. Sabet says the money will be used to fight California's Prop 64, as well as the other initiatives for marijuana law reform on the ballot. Belmar, New Jersey. Cannabis oils used for topical preparations went on sale for the first time in New Jersey's dysfunctional medical marijuana program. While 5 dispensaries are currently operating in New Jersey, only one, Compassionate Sciences, has been approved by the state to dispense the products. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Friday, September 9, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Forwarding the cause of legalization and research of the growing cannabis industry, one podcast at a time. The Cannabis Radio Network.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs. This is Dan Michaels from DanMichaelsAudio.com, and you're listening to Radical Russ on CannabisRadio.com.
Don't want to spend money on a night out, but don't know what to do other than watching TV or playing video games? Consider playing guitar, bass, banjo, or mandolin. The instrument will give you hours of entertainment with friends with minimal expense. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Once again, another team of scientists is trying to perfect the technology for police to detect marijuana use in drivers during roadside stops. This time, it's researchers at Stanford University in California who are trying to create a handheld saliva testing device for THC. This was reported in USA Today, where they wrote, quote, officers who suspect marijuana intoxication could use a cotton swab to wipe the inside of a driver's mouth, test it in the new device called a potalizer, and get results viewable on a smartphone or laptop in just 3 minutes, according to a Stanford News release. Currently, officials rely on blood, breath, or urine tests that aren't always accurate. Saliva tests exist, but also aren't completely accurate. Stanford's device can show THC in the range of 0 to 50 nanograms per milliliter of saliva, within most measurements of impairment, the release states. Colorado law says drivers with 5 nanograms of active THC in their blood can be prosecuted. End quote. Now, there's so much wrong with this, but we marijuana law reformers are somewhat to blame. For about a decade now, we have been imploring society to treat marijuana like alcohol. By doing so, we activated the alcohol frame for marijuana. Now, that was a smart move to get people to understand the relative safety of marijuana and to understand that it could be a taxed and regulated substance like alcohol for adults. But it came at the cost of getting society to believe that marijuana is like alcohol. So now they want to know where is the breathalyzer for pot, like alcohol. Of course, in this respect, marijuana couldn't be more unlike alcohol. The science behind breathalyzers is pretty solid. Human bodies metabolize alcohol molecules at a set rate based on how much was consumed and how large the body is. Detection of alcohol molecules in the breath correlate quite well with levels of impairment. With very few exceptions, somebody at a 0.08 blood alcohol content is too impaired to drive, whether they're a petite ballerina or a burly lumberjack. The science behind detecting marijuana impairment, however, is not reliable. Human bodies metabolize THC molecules at wildly unpredictable rates based on each individual's body fat, energy levels, and history of consumption. Detection of THC molecules in the bodily fluids doesn't correlate at all with levels of impairment. The burly lumberjack who's smoking his first joint may be far more impaired at just 5 nanograms of active THC than the petite ballerina who's a daily wake and baker who just cleared a bong. And this isn't just me saying this. Even the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration admits this. This is from their cannabis fact sheet. Quote, "It is inadvisable to try and predict effects based on blood THC concentrations alone, and currently impossible to predict specific effects based on metabolite concentrations. It is possible for a person to be affected by marijuana use with concentrations of THC in their blood below the limit of detection of the method. Pharmacological effects of marijuana vary with dose, route of administration, experience of user, vulnerability to psychoactive effects, and setting of use. Tolerance may develop to some pharmacological effects of THC. Tolerance to many of the effects of marijuana may develop rapidly after only a few doses, but also disappears rapidly." End quote. So even the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration say it's inadvisable to try to predict based on these fluids, and that people develop tolerance. And another problem with the idea of saliva testing is that if you're really pulling someone over who's had too much to toke, they're going to have a dry mouth like the Sahara. Cops may not be able to get a decent saliva sample in such a case. If a roadside test accurately determined that a person was too stoned to drive, I'd be all for it. But all these tests can ever accomplish is just determining if someone consumed marijuana in the past. Arbitrary per se DOAD laws like Washington State's 5 nanogram limit serve only to detect drivers who smoke pot, not drivers who are too impaired. Regular cannabis consumers like me never achieve a THC level below the residual 5 nanograms or more that I probably have after a full night's sleep. We've got to push back against this hard. It's not as if legalization invents cars and marijuana smokers who drive them. We've been here for decades. Year after year, we see highway traffic fatalities and crashes declining, even as year after year we keep legalizing medical and recreational marijuana, and even as year after year more adults are using it more often. This is not science. This is not a need. This potalizer is just a solution in search of a problem. a problem that doesn't exist.
Sorry ass motherfucker got nothing on me, right?
Damn straight, Barry. All right, happy 420. Who are we saying 420 happy to? Oh, Sheridan, Wyoming. Happy 420 to Sheridan, Wyoming today in the Mountain Time Zone. We got to take a break because we got a mandatory safety meeting to get to. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the new study on using pot while pregnant. There's some good news for you, ladies.
Next to THC and CBD, you can now add CBR to your cannabis vernacular. CBR as in CannabisRadio.com.
The cannabis industry is growing, business is booming, and as new opportunities arise in newly legalized states, each market is getting more competitive. Today, it takes more than just being a good grower. Do you have the resources to market and handle this ever-changing business landscape? Let Canna Management Corporation help you grow your canna business with our vast resources and experience to make your business a fully functional service company. Financial management, HR, sales, marketing, efficiency, and more. CMC has the experience and the expertise to improve your business and help you better meet the demands of your clients and customers. Call Canna Management Corporation and let our team get you ready to grow. 415-269-8015. That's 415-269-8015. Or visit canna-management.com.
Tommy Chong is ready to cut through the smoke and change the tone of Tilk Radio.
You're going to be a great-granddad. Pretty cool. Morgan is Ray Dawn's son. Morgan and his wife Tracy, they've been trying to have a baby for quite some time. Did you hear what I said to Morgan? What? Do you know who the father is?
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today in the Data Mines, we take a look at a new study that is breaking all across the internet today. This is from the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis and was published in the October issue of the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And what it finds is that smoking marijuana during pregnancy does not appear to increase the risk of preterm birth or other harmful birth outcomes. Preterm birth, premature babies, right? Now, these researchers, when they took a look at it, of course, previous studies have been out there showing claiming to show all sorts of problems for women that smoke pot during pregnancy, like low birth weight, premature birth, failure to thrive, etc. But they've always been complicated by other factors. These researchers sought out to find this information, and initially they did find some problems. They did find that these women that smoke pot during pregnancy had more of a chance of having a preterm or low birth weight baby. But then they started tearing into the numbers, and we're talking a lot of numbers here. What they did is they were taking a look at 31 previous studies, including more than 7,800 women who used marijuana during pregnancy and another 124,000 women who did not use marijuana in their pregnancy. And as they combed through the numbers and they took those women who were cannabis consumers and found that they had problems with their pregnancies, they later found out as they were sifting through the numbers that when they factored in tobacco smoking, all those risks went away. In other words, the women who were using cannabis alone without also using tobacco had no statistically significant difference in the outcome of their pregnancies than the women that did not use any cannabis at all. And this could also explain why some of those studies were confounded, is because, in European countries, in some Caribbean countries, in some of the places they've done these studies, the consumption of cannabis goes along with tobacco. They smoke it in spliffs. They mix it together. So all these years, these past 30, 40 years, when we've been getting these negative reports, much of it has been due to tobacco smoking, not cannabis smoking. Here's what they found. They found overall, women who smoked marijuana during pregnancy were 43% more likely to have a low birth weight baby and 32% more likely to have a preterm birth than women who didn't smoke marijuana during pregnancy. But when they looked at the only marijuana smokers that didn't use tobacco, there was no difference. The women who used both, by the way, were 85% more likely to have a preterm birth. It goes along with what I've always said about blunts and spliffs, mixing cannabis and tobacco. Tobacco makes what's good about cannabis better, but cannabis makes what's bad about tobacco worse. Part of the reason a lot of people mix that is because tobacco speeds along and intensifies the high you get from the THC in the cannabis. That's tobacco making cannabis better. On the other hand, cannabis is a bronchodilator, opens up your lung passages and allows more of that nasty tobacco smoke and tar and carcinogens in. So you take the good, you take the bad, and then you get the facts of life, right? I don't particularly like tobacco in my cannabis products, and that's part of the reason why. Now, this study was not looking at long-term effects. They weren't looking at, all right, these women that smoke pot during their pregnancy, how did their kids turn out by the time they were 3, right? Did they pick up language any quicker or slower? Did they walk any sooner or later? Did they have any developmental outcomes that were different? There have been some studies on this. Dr. Melanie Dreyer is the one who's got the most cited study on this, on pregnant mothers in Jamaica, where she found that long-term, these kids were fine. There was no difference between the cannabis smoking mom's kids and the sober mom's kids. And we find this over and over again as we look through populations, especially cannabis smoking populations. I like to joke that if there was any serious problems with pregnancy or fertility due to cannabis use, wouldn't the Rastafarians have died out by now, right? Wouldn't Jamaica be depopulated? Bob Marley's got like 12 kids, Willie Nelson's got 7 or 9. Tommy Chong's got 7 or 9. I forget which has which, but it's clear now. And over the 7,000 years that we've had people using cannabis on this planet, you'd think that if there were any sort of serious problems that were going to befall the kids, we'd know it by now. We wouldn't have to keep studying it. It's not like alcohol, where fetal alcohol syndrome was quite obvious. We could very easily tell who were the moms that were drinking during their pregnancy based on their kids. And we find, again, time and time again, the deleterious effects from cigarette smoking on pregnant moms and their children. This continuation of these scaremongering, half-baked junk science ideas about women and cannabis use are just another way of trying to enforce women to not use cannabis, another way to try to scare them out of making the safer choice. Here in the state of Oregon, our law mandates that a little scrap of paper is handed to every person who makes a cannabis purchase explaining how marijuana is no good for pregnant moms or breastfeeding moms. It's a terrible, terrible thing. Yes, even me, single, childless Russ, has to take that piece of paper explaining how bad it is for pregnant moms. It's time for this nonsense to end and finally give pregnant women the choice to use cannabis for morning sickness, for pain, for depression that happens during pregnancy. It's one of the safest things we could give a pregnant mom. And yet, they'll prescribe all sorts of pharmaceuticals for these pregnant moms, knowing they have terrible side effects. All right, stay tuned. We're going to get Lenny Freeling on the line for our Cops Say Legalized Drugs segment, just a day late.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Keep your cannabis cravings under control. Feed your mind with CannabisRadio.com.
Oh, let the marijuana llama tell you something now about a game for your phone gonna make you say, wow! The game's about the game of growing cannabis for cash. Grow the seed.
Hey, Russ.
Put the savings in the stash. Little by little, your empire grows
Russ.
large. Put the big celebrities inside your entourage. You can choose to play with Snoop or me or Cheech and Chong. Cypress Hill, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa with a bong. The name of the game is Hemp Inc., that's the point. Download and play while you light yourself a joint.
Russ?
The business of cannabis should be no crime.
Russ?
Hemp Inc. is even hot-proofed by the man who run High Times. Oh yeah? Get it on Android and iOS today. Marijuana llama out. Got to tend to me own crops, you know. Money don't make itself. Hemp Inc.
Hi, I'm Montel Williams. Most of you know me as a talk show host, but I'm also an author, actor, single father of 4, avid snowboarder, and I'm also a medical marijuana patient. Living with multiple sclerosis, I'm in pain every day. Medical marijuana is my last resort, and it helps me when all other drugs have failed. If you'd like more information about medical marijuana, you can contact the Marijuana Policy Project at mpp.org or call 1-877-JOIN-MPP.
The Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, the National Wildlife Refuge for Marijuana Unicorns.
Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: Cops say legalize drugs.
Welcome back, everybody. It's 33 after the hour, and normally we do this segment on Thursday, but we missed our good friend Lenny Freeling because I messed up on my end, Lenny. It's all my fault. Welcome back to the show, Lenny.
Russ, as always, it is a pleasure. I'm glad we're both here.
I am too, and it's a beautiful Friday here, and we are, as of today, 60 days away from Marijuana Election Night 2016. I know, of course, Denver's got the social use initiative going, but are there other issues going on in Colorado we ought to know about?
So many that they're beyond counting, and that in and of itself is the issue. In addition to the social use, which is such a critical issue, whether I am driving to Durango, 8-hour drive, and want to smoke in a legal place or vape in a legal place, or whether it's one of the tourists that we welcome. The social use is the beginning of a very important legislative trend. The other thing that is a day-by-day struggle is the sorting out of the layers. We have our Constitution. We have Section 18, Article 18, Section 14, 1814. We took a little trip since year 2000. And your age is showing when you laugh at that.
Yes, I know.
And then in 2013, it became recreational law with Amendment 64, which is now Article 18, Section 16. So we have the Constitution. When you have that, the next level of law is enabling legislation. And that does stuff like set up study committees and interested groups. And then they figure out what laws we really need. Then the regulatory agencies who are tasked by the law with enforcing it and setting up the systems have their regulations. Then, because that's not nearly complicated enough. Then we have every single city in Colorado, few still taking no position, some home rule cities with more power than cities anywhere in the United States, some not home rule cities, and then, because that's not complicated enough to have city regulations and city criminal ordinances carrying $2,650 and a year in jail maximum penalties, with the claims by some of these cities that they can fine somebody $2,650 a day and a year in jail per plant over what the city says. And oh yes, by the way, every city picks a different number, which most of the time contradicts the state and federal and the Constitution, state constitution. And as an aside, as we all recall, now I think we're on the fourth aside, we have the federal law, and we can talk about that sometime. We all know what the challenge is there. So we've got this multi-layered thing where I may get a call that is simply somebody asking, can I grow 18 plants in Lock Buoy, Colorado at the Kansas border in my basement? And if I could give them an answer, yes, no, I would do it. If only. Yeah. And when I tell them what effort is involved and that they have to pay me to give them a yes or no on what the state constitution sure sounds like it says they can do, we have layers of problems. And when I honestly put to people, you have a choice. Follow your city's unique regulation ordinance or risk paying money or jail. Usually it's money, not jail. Or become a test case. And
this has got to be so difficult for Coloradoans to have to deal with, because I mean, I grew up in Idaho, and when it came to booze, there was only one thing you had to remember county to county was what was the closing time, or did they sell on Sunday? And that was about it. That was the only, there wasn't, I couldn't not have this kind of booze in Ada County, but this other kind of booze in Canyon County, or limits on a 6-pack there versus a 12-pack there. How are Coloradoans dealing with this? And are a lot of them getting caught up in the system because of it?
Colorado is dealing with it overall. Let's be clear. Colorado is doing a kick-ass job, and I think the FCC allows me to describe that body part in that way. Colorado really is. On a city-by-city level, the kind of things that troubled me the most, a city ordinance that says your top secret, protected by the Constitution, secret, private, medical grow in your basement. Oh yeah, by the way, it's illegal in our city for you to not register your private secret grow with us. And of course, that gives us permission to inspect it anytime we want, to send in the electrical inspector. And look, I'm in favor of electricity being done to code. That makes sense. I can't fundamentally fight with somebody who needs an electrical inspection. But to say you have no right to privacy guaranteed by the Constitution, our system statewide is so careful that the computer that holds the medical marijuana registry information is not, unless they've changed it, is not connected to the internet. There's nothing to hack.
Yeah. That's great. And another issue that I think is probably on a lot of Coloradoans' minds is the recent pronouncement. Now, this was out of the Ninth Circuit, so I know it doesn't cover Colorado, but that pronouncement about medical marijuana patients and their Second Amendment gun rights. Is anyone talking about that in Colorado?
We're talking about it long and loud. And what is fascinating about the ruling and what is so blatantly federally unconstitutional is this. They could say you can't possess a firearm while you're impaired. And in fact, that wouldn't be a bad law. But they're in effect saying the same as if they said, if you are over 21, therefore legally able to buy alcohol, therefore legally able to drink to excess and commit a Class 2 misdemeanor, we call it drunk with a gun. Therefore, because you're over 21, we're going to make that a status offense, and nobody under 21 can purchase a gun. That's identical to saying because someone has a medical card, they will fill that, they will go buy pot. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. They have a card. They have permission. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. If they do, maybe they'll smoke too much. Maybe they'll then pull out a firearm. Guess what? That's already illegal. So the Ninth Circuit, which is not a circuit we generally hate, is just an embarrassment with this decision. Mm-hmm. It's atrocious. It is intellectually dishonest, and that's one of the greatest insults I am capable of. Intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot of response here in the state of Oregon. We have a lot of people in the rural areas that treasure their Second Amendment rights. And I know in Colorado, didn't you have, like, there was a 3 or 4 legislators who went down in recalls because of Second Amendment issues. Is this igniting any sort of political will amongst the typical conservative gun rights supporters to come around on this marijuana issue?
Because it was a private communication, I don't feel comfortable divulging my source, but I will tell you the single most conservative gun rights advocate in the country and one of the top in the world agreed with me on my analysis, reworded it, sent it out to his private firearms trained teachers internationally, quoting 99% of what I wrote to him, explaining why this is insane. So I can give you at least one concrete example of a rabid Second Amendment supporter saying, they can't do that. That's wrong. That is just wrong. So the feedback I've heard so far is completely against the Ninth Circuit. That's from smokers. That's from non-smokers. That's from people who hate marijuana. People are looking at it and saying, you can't do that. You simply can't do that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the people who aren't saying that right now seem to be the National Rifle Association, which hasn't responded to numerous activists and journalists' requests on this issue. And it always stymies me because one of the scaremongering tactics they've always said is that if the federal government registered guns, it'd be a list to take people's gun rights away. Well, what's a medical marijuana registry now but a list for the government to take your gun away?
Fortunately, they don't really have access to it. And the NRA is in a very interesting position. Although, of course, generally, but not exclusively, they're fairly conservative. There's also, I think, a strong libertarian bent to it. And after so many years of taking the position that any restriction on the right to own firearms is bad, short of, we know you're insane, you're a felon still in prison, to overstate the point. Short of that, their position has been any restriction is a problem. And now they're in a spot where I think, this is me making it up, I think they're saying, Well, on the one hand, we really don't want to come out as pro-marijuana. That's not the tenor of our membership as far as we can tell. On the other hand, we can't really come out and say this is a rational restriction on gun ownership. That counters everything we've ever stood for, so all we can do is shut up.
Stop digging.
What else can they do?
Good point. Good point. Lenny Freeling is a longtime criminal defense attorney, and he's with the normal organizations out there in Colorado. Former judge, speaker for law enforcement against prohibition. If you want wise, learned men and women like Lenny to come out to your area and speak the truth about the drug war, just go to leap.cc. They got a catalog list all across the country and around the world of great speakers who will help you out. Lenny, before we let you go, is there anything else you need to tell us? Shout out any promotions or contact info?
Russ, I love you, man, and thank you as always. You're my hero. I'm going to give a shout out to My Canary app on the iTunes store at My Canary or mycanaryapp.com for the science paper. We've developed an iPhone, iTunes app for not measuring meaningless blood chemistry, but looking at performance, looking at reaction time, looking at things that help us decide if we should be turning on a table saw or driving a car or watching Captain Kangaroo. And let's look at performance and not a chemistry that, in the case of alcohol, is a clue, and in the case of THC is scientifically not even a clue.
Check out the My Canary app on the App Store. Thanks, Lenny.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
From dabs to chivas, sativas to indicas, we roll out a whole concentrate of fresh new content every week. It's like going from the greenhouse to the dispensary. CannabisRadio.com.
Play as Ted Growing, expelled botany sophomore and the biggest grower in town, only on Weed Firm Replanted. Available on the App Store and Google Play.
It's a lot of work being the biggest grower in town. Maintaining a room full of plants while dealing with a slew of eccentric customers? From a hardcore partier to the curious neighbor next door.
Is anybody home?
Help me expand my bud business by unlocking new strains, customizing my grow room, and completing challenges that you can't get enough of. Grow your empire so big you can see it from space. Low on funds? Don't worry. Weed Firm Replanted is free to download.
Download Weed Firm Replanted for free on the App Store and Google Play today. Get growing, Mr. Growing.
Previously on the Stoner Jesus Show.
Hello?
Hey, are you the one that put the ad on Craigslist? It was in the personal section about, want to have a little good time tonight?
No.
Nothing about, any backdoor action?
No.
A little fifth base? You're not into that?
No, and I suggest you don't fucking call my phone number, you fucking perverted bastard.
Are you sure you're not the one on the Craigslist? You're talking dirty to me. Damn, she hung up.
That was good.
It was funny, though.
The Stoner Jesus Show, live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Or find the Stoner Jesus Show podcast on demand at CannabisRadio.com and StonerJesus.net. Peace, bitches.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
We need to build a wall.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Today in the rant, as we go into the weekend, I want to talk about some of my favorite things, and those would be sex and drugs and marijuana and freedom. And as we have gone through this journey together over the past 8 years, discussing marijuana politics, the issues around it, trying to get it legalized, medical use, spiritual use, etc., to me, it's always been just a small facet of what I'm overall fighting for, and that is freedom. I am fighting for the freedom of adults to do with themselves and others whatever the hell they want to do, so long as everybody's consenting, everybody's able to consent, and it's not harming anyone else. Now, it just so happens that smoking a bowl or a joint or a vapor bag or hitting a dab or eating a cookie or whatever it might be that has marijuana in it is the kind of freedom I want to have. That's what I'm into. I like marijuana, and I'm not hurting anyone else doing it, and that's the freedom I choose to express. But our fight for marijuana freedom, we should never lose track of the fact that the marijuana itself really doesn't matter. This would be just as, the prohibition would be just as stupid if it was whipped cream, right? If it was whipped cream, and you can't have whipped cream. Why not? Well, we said so. Well, who gave you the authority to say so? So it doesn't matter if it's whipped cream or marijuana or kratom that they're starting to ban now. It doesn't matter what they're trying to ban. What they're trying to do is infringe on freedom for no good reason. Now, I'm not any sort of anarcho-libertarian type who thinks everybody ought to be as free to do whatever the hell they want as they want to. Obviously, there needs to be limits to freedom, but those limits need to be balanced with society's need to keep public safety in order versus individual freedom. And when in doubt, individual freedom should win. Tie should go to the runner. Tie should go to the individual freedom here. They're starting to ban this kratom now, which I've seen it advertised in head shops for a couple of years now around Portland and never cared to try it. Didn't give a shit about it. Not my thing. Until the DEA put it on the Schedule 1. Now I'm interested as hell. Now I'm really interested in seeing what it's all about. In fact, they have to take it off the shelves by the end of this month. I'm going to go run out and buy me some just to have it. Just because the DEA said I couldn't. Just because they dared to take my freedom away to make that choice. I was probably never going to make that choice. And by the way, DEA, so were probably a whole bunch of young people that you've now just enticed to try to find out what kratom is about, just like me. Good work, DEA. And it's funny to me because it's kind of selective what we choose to take the freedoms away about. It's not that they're taking our freedom away for using marijuana because it gets us high, because there's lots of things that get you high that are perfectly legal. If you do it right, you can get high on nutmeg. Don't do it, by the way. Don't try, because it's extremely toxic, right? It's like one of those 1 to 5 type of kill ratios, man. You can overdo it real quick and die from nutmeg, but you can get high on nutmeg. Nobody's talking about banning nutmeg or limiting nutmeg or putting warnings on nutmeg or running nutmeg through the FDA process, but it'll get you high. Damn straight it will. If you go to sex shops, you may go to sex shops from time to time. You may see, maybe you do, I do, and you may see these packets or these containers for whipped cream, homemade whipped cream containers. And then you may see that they'll sell you 50 of these little single shot nitrous oxide canister things to make your whipped cream with. Folks, this isn't because people at the sex shops are trying to play some sort of banana split game when they get back to the house. It's because they take those canisters and they blast them into the container, and then they inhale the nitrous oxide for a high. My chat room is saying it's whippets. Yes, whippets. Exactly. That's what they're called. And it's perfectly legal. Nobody's stopping you from getting high that way. Why not? Why aren't they? Whippets are more harmful than marijuana. Not by much, but they are. Why isn't that illegal? At those same sex shops, you can get something called Rush. And there's other names, Jungle Juice and a bunch of other. They come in these little tiny bottles. And what they're ostensibly for is for polish removing. You know, kind of an acetone kind of thing, right? That's supposedly what they're for. Originally, they were for head cleaner. And I don't mean that in the sexual stand. I mean like for tape cassette decks and stuff, right? Reel-to-reel tape. Clean the heads of the recording equipment, right? But there's not a whole bunch of audio files at the sex shop trying to get head cleaner. What those are for is, again, huffing, inhalants. Kind of a dissociative type of drug. And it's perfectly legal. So it's interesting to me how we pick and choose which drugs are bad and why we need to restrict those freedoms. A lot of it has to do with the morality, of course. Judgments of the people who are using those drugs, not necessarily the drugs themselves. And this extends far beyond just drugs. Like I said, sex and drugs and marijuana and freedom. It extends into the realm of sex. It's been interesting to me how the marijuana movement and the gay rights movement have kind of been riding side by side on this civil rights adventure here. And there's so much similarities between the two issues. It really just boils down to, hey, I want to do something with my body that some people don't like. And who has the right to stop you from doing that? And there's so many rights we still have yet to acquire, to recognize for both same-sex couples and cannabis consumers. Parental rights, organ transplant rights, all sorts of, employment, housing, all the different ways that we get discriminated against. Because somebody out there wants to restrict our freedom. And this goes back, this is so woven into the American DNA. This is the birthright of our Puritan ancestors. What's that old definition of Puritanism? The haunting feeling that somebody somewhere might be having fun. This is something that as we continue through the 21st century, I hope our society continues to shed this Puritanism. And it's happening. I mean, you watch TV today compared to TV when I was growing up, and vast gulf of difference between what's allowable, what's considered, family hour television these days compared to when I was growing up. Now you've got VH1, they got that Amber Rose show. On Comedy Central, they got the Nikki Glaser show. Numerous shows where there's open and frank discussion of sex. So it's changing. It's happening. And as these generations come up in a world of legal marijuana, I think it's going to happen quicker. The rate of change is going to increase dramatically. I truly believe that part of the reason why marijuana is one of those drugs that we pick on and not inhalants or whippets or whatever is because of marijuana's potential to open your perspectives and open your mind and to foster your empathy for other people. And the more that takes place, the more connection we get facilitated through legal marijuana, the more people are going to question all these other restrictions on our freedom. The more people are going to understand that just because something's always been that way, it's always been banned, it's always been no good, just because the majority might think it's immoral, that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And one final thing I like about marijuana legalization is, how long have you known people that are like, I don't vote, it doesn't matter, voting doesn't matter. And yet in 25 states now, and 4 legal ones, we've seen how voting matters. Whether you're voting for an initiative or you're voting for legislators that will craft laws to reform our marijuana policies, voting matters. There's only 60 days before the election. Make sure you're registered. And remember, you can help these legalization initiatives even if you don't live in that state. They'll take your phone banking volunteering, your email volunteering, all sorts of ways to help. You can always contribute money. That's all the time we got for Hour 1. Stay tuned. Toker Talk Radio is next with our new live phone number. For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you